Talks of peace at the White House, but with Moscow silent and Ukraine defiant. Is this the first step to ending the war or just the calm before the next storm? Good evening, this is Mousumi. Welcome to The Global Eye. Let's talk about the White House talks, Trump, Zelensky and Europe. In Washington, the war's diplomacy took a sharp turn. President Donald Trump welcomed Ukraine's Zelensky and key European leaders to the White House. This time, the tone was markedly different from earlier. It was cordial, constructive, and with a clear push toward shaping a peace framework. And the headline outcome is that Europe would become the first line of defense for Ukraine after a peace deal, while America would coordinate and support, promising good protection but not leading with troops. This meeting followed Trump's summit in Alaska with Vladimir Putin, which failed to secure a ceasefire. Reports suggest Moscow pressed for major concessions, particularly in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, that demands that Kyiv flatly rejects. Now, Trump is trying to set up direct talks between Zelensky and Putin, followed by a possible three-way summit with himself mediating. The Kremlin has not yet agreed, but the talks are on the way, we'll come to know. But what are the key takeaways now? Security guarantees, not NATO membership yet. Ukraine is being offered NATO-like protections through a European-led framework. The US would organize and supply, but Europe would frontline the commitment. Money and weapons as leverage. European nations are considering large-scale weapons purchases and industrial tie-ups for Ukraine, particularly in air defense and drone technology, both to deter Russia and anchor any peace deal. Now, Russia's demands remain maximalist. Moscow continues to seek significant concessions, but Ukraine refuses to trade land for peace. Now, this is process over substance for now. Trump wants a Zelensky-Putin meeting first, then a trilateral. Europe is cautiously supportive but preparing fallback plans like sanctions, pressure and long-term defense packages if talks collapse. So now we see three chessboards. Zelensky's calculus, that's Zelensky's goal is ironclad security guarantees that survive US political shifts. His red lines are clear: no recognition of Russian annexations, no land for peace and no ceasefire that simply lets Moscow regroup. His leverage lies in continued battlefield resilience and Europe's willingness to finance and arm Ukraine for the long haul. Now, if we see Trump's calculus, Trump's aim is to own the peace process and deliver a headline deal without tying America to open-ended troop deployments. So his bargaining chips include America's coordination role, potential selective sanctions relief, and defense industry partnerships that Ukraine wants. But his Alaska meeting with Putin showed both ambition and limits. Personal diplomacy alone cannot bend Russia's terms. So now if we see Europe's calculus, Europe is increasingly stepping up. London, Paris, Berlin and others are converging on a long-term horizon guarantee systems like air defenses, logistics hubs, rapid training rotations and possibly reassurance forces stationed in NATO countries near Ukraine. What's their logic? Geography makes Ukraine's security a European responsibility, especially with US politics unpredictable. And the big disagreements territory that Russia wants Ukraine to surrender Donetsk and Luhansk, Kyiv refuses. A potential off-ramp could be a time-bound ceasefire with international monitoring and snap-back sanctions without formal recognition of annexations. And if we speak about the guarantee details, Europe debates how NATO-like guarantees should be. A likely outcome: automatic defense triggers like rapid resupply and intelligence sharing, but short of full Article 5 obligations. So if we sequence now, Russia wants concessions first, then a freeze. Ukraine and Europe demand guarantees first, then talks. Trump's process splits the difference but not the substance. But what's next? Over the next 2 to 6 weeks, 3 scenarios loom. The frameworks for talks. Zelensky and Putin agree to meet, backed by European guarantees and US coordination. Fighting continues but at reduced tempo. Interim freeze without recognition. A monitored ceasefire, that is, with sanctions relief tied to verifiable withdrawals, plus automatic resupply clauses to deter violations. Now the talks stall. Russia delays, Europe presses forward with guarantees anyway, and Ukraine receives a surge of Western equipment before winter. And the key signals to watch are a date and venue for Zelensky-Putin talks, a written European-US guarantee outlined, and Russia's battlefield behavior. Now the gambit is clear. Get Zelensky and Putin in a room, then aim for a 3-way summit. Trump pushes for a 3-way summit. Now will Putin show up or slam the door shut on diplomacy? In fact, US President Donald Trump confirmed that he has spoken to Russia's President Vladimir Putin about arranging a meeting with Ukraine's President Zelensky. During the recent talks, today's talks at the White House, at the conclusion of the meetings, these are Trump's words, I called President Putin, Trump says so, and began the arrangements for a meeting at a location to be determined between President Putin and President Zelensky. Trump also wrote, after that meeting takes place, we will have a trilat, which would be the 2 presidents plus myself. Trump also added that security guarantees for Ukraine were discussed, which he said would be provided by various European countries with a coordination with the United States of America. Now, this announcement represents a significant moment in the geopolitics of the Ukraine war and the global balance of power. By proposing a trilateral meeting that includes himself, Vladimir Putin and Zelensky, Trump is attempting to insert himself as the central arbiter of peace, a role that could redefine America's leadership in Europe. For Zelensky, such a move carries both promise and peril. It raises the possibility of advancing towards a ceasefire or settlement, but also risks Kyiv being pressured into compromises under a framework largely designed by Washington and Moscow. Trump's stress on security guarantees coordinated with European nations seems to suggest an alternative to NATO membership, potentially a softer security umbrella that might appease Moscow while trying to reassure Kyiv. For Putin, this is already a diplomatic victory, since it elevates him back into legitimacy as a negotiating equal rather than an aggressor isolated by sanctions and war crimes accusations. Europe, however, is caught in a dilemma. Should it shoulder the responsibility of providing credible guarantees, knowing internal divisions and hesitations could undermine such pledges? So, the larger implication is whether this approach signals a pivot from isolating Russia to managing Russia, reshaping the post-war order not through victory or the battlefield, but through political bargaining. Now, the fundamental question remains, is this a real step toward ending the war, or is Ukraine at risk of becoming a pawn in a geopolitical transactions shaped by great powers? The peace path is visible, but every step depends on whether Moscow accepts deterrence it cannot cheaply test. So, let me leave a few questions today. Will European-led guarantees without NATO membership really deter Moscow or invite Russia to test their limits? Can Trump's leader-to-leader diplomacy overcome Russia's demand for concessions that Ukraine cannot accept? If a ceasefire is reached, how can the West prevent it from becoming just another pause that allows Russia to regroup and strike again? Is Europe ready to shoulder the burden of being Ukraine's main defender if US politics shifts once more? And perhaps the deepest question, does this diplomatic path bring true peace or merely the illusion of it, while the battlefield waits for its next ignition? Thank you so much. Stay tuned to The Global Eye for more updates and insights.